All right. Trying to get Twitter Spaces started, but it's telling me that I need to enable microphone permission. And I can't seem to find that. All right. Find Twitter. Okay. I hope that gets it to work. Excellent. General, if you could just look for the space now. Since I haven't used done Twitter Spaces before. General Mugisha, Muntu, are you able to find the space? Because it's up now.
Actually, I'm in your, oh yes, now I see. Okay.
Excellent, excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I have to cover all those because we are aware that this is not just a Uganda conversation, but thank you very much for joining us for this conversation with General Mugisha Muntu, the Ask Mugisha Muntu series. We're glad you can join us for the conversation. We apologize for the late start. We should have started at the top of the hour. We are 16 minutes. We should have started at the top of the hour. We're 16 minutes. We're 16 minutes late, and because we are streaming on a number of platforms, that explains some of the feedback that we're going to solve that. General, could you mute on your end? General, could you mute on your end?
Try and do that.
Okay. Okay. Okay, sounds like it's solved now. Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome. My name is Iguma Gabriel. For those who may not know me, of course, I acknowledge that here, General Mugisha Muntu is probably the one who is known better. But it's what an honor it is for me to host General Mugisha Muntu on this conversation on Twitter Spaces, on Facebook, and on YouTube. So whichever platform you're joining us on, thank you very much for joining the conversation. This platform is made available for us to interact with General Mugisha Muntu, find out his view and the view of the Alliance for National Transformation on a number of national issues. Since the conversation is not about me, I will just make sure that your questions get to the good general. So whichever platform you're on, we have a team that's monitoring all the platforms to make sure that your questions, can be received and put to the general. So we're going to start without further ado. For anyone who does not know General Mugisha Muntu, and I highly doubt that there's anyone joining us today who does not know him, but for avoidance of doubt, he is the leader of the Alliance for National Transformation Party. He did represent this party as a presidential candidate in the just concluded 2021 presidential elections. I believe the party came fourth in the presidential race. He is a former army chief, army commander of Uganda, former legislator for East African Legislative Assembly, and I could go on and on and on. General, it is so good to have you this evening. And if you could just test your microphone on Twitter Spaces, because we're actually going to start right now. General, you could ask to speak. All right, I just approved your request. If you could just test it out.
Okay, it's now on.
Excellent, I can hear you. Then if you could mute it, then okay. All right, General, a number of things have been happening in the nation, but even before we get into that, could you just give us a quick update on what you have been up to and what the Alliance has been up to?
Thank you, Gabriel, for hosting me. And also to thank all the people who are listening to us or viewing us on the different platforms. To thank the colleagues who in the party who are doing all the work that is necessary to be done for us to be able to carry out these programs. It's been quite a hectic 1 year after elections. Been a lockdown largely for the most part of the year. Nevertheless, due to the convenience of technologies, we kept on active online. We conducted a number of meetings. And before the lockdown in May, we had fortunately managed to move around the country and conducted 21 sub-regional meetings in which we met 90+% of our 740 candidates that run on our ticket, right from Council LC3 to the highest level. The highest level we have is the chairperson of LC5. And then when the lockdown came in, we had been planning to start our exercise of going around the country, which we were not able to. Immediately after the lockdown was lifted, we got into trainings. We done 2, and we trained the 50 candidates who went through at the different levels in 2 batches, one at LC3 level, another one at the city level and national level. And then we've been planning to embark on going down to build our grassroots structures. We had planned to start it the month of November. Unfortunately, we have not yet set off. We're still trying to put together some logistics. I believe now we will be able to do that after the festival season. And the rest, we've been having many colleagues who've been going on different platforms, on TVs, on radios, disseminating the message of Alliance for National Transformation, because we build on 2 pillars. One, having the infrastructure in terms of leadership committees at different levels, but also one of the critical things that we want to ensure that we do is keep on communicating who we are as Alliance for National Transformation. Being a value-driven organization, we know that we're operating in an environment where many people had more or less ceased to focus on issues of values, on issues of policy differences between different organizations. We know it has been a tough area, but we know that once we continue doing that, there's an adequate number of Ugandans who believe in that. And once we are able to link up and build a critical number of leaders, and also in the support base, that will shift the politics of the country from where it is to issue-based politics. So we continue doing that on different platforms, different media houses. And we are thankful that we seem to be getting many people within the country with whom this message resonates. And we're going to keep at it until we have a significant shift in thinking. And it's so self-evident. I mean, when you hear all the things which are being said, or the weaknesses that we do face, the cause of it is that we get involved in more or less in politics of excitement and reactive politics, where we keep on blaming and criticizing, but not working on solutions. And that's what is required. So whichever organization is going to turn around the fortunes of this country, it must be composed of a significant number of leaders who are focused on creating solutions to the challenges that we do face. Again, I would like to thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that update on what the Alliance has been up to the last couple of months. And from what you say, there's many things in there that I'd like to pick on, but because that's not the conversation for today, I'll let that be for another time. However, I'd like to pick on one thing. Whereas mobilization going around the country, and reaching out to the people, should be something to be celebrated and to create positive news. In the case of the Alliance for National Transformation, in some circles, it's created negative news for you because other parties, and particularly the National Unity Platform, in their attempts to go around the country, they've been stopped. And yet, they point at the fact that the ANT is going about their business, which brings in all kinds of insinuations that you've definitely had before, of the Alliance for National Transformation, and particularly you as the leader, being favored in some way by the regime. So how come, the Alliance can go ahead and have its activities of mobilizing, and then, especially in the eye of the media, other parties do not have it smooth when they attempt it?
Yeah, we hear that. It's not the first time for us to become almost victims of that kind of. It's not the first time for us to almost become victims of that kind of operations of the regime. The regime is quite deliberate in the manner in which it does its things. And unfortunately, many of us in the opposition never recognize that the regime designs certain strategies. One, to influence public thinking or public opinion. Also, two, to influence what happens in the opposition. And when we respond at times in immature ways, we end up fighting amongst each other and exactly doing what the regime wants. I know when we used to be in, some of us, when we were still in FDC, there used to be two tendencies within FDC. There are those who believe that civil disobedience was the path to taking power. And there are those of us who believe that, yes, while that was important and it is a legitimate way of expressing grievances, and that you can even conduct organization around it. And in a number of cases in some countries, people have succeeded. From our own assessment, some of us thought that the main thrust of our effort needed to be in party building, right from the grassroots, and make ourselves ready to take power through whichever path would be readily available, that would be possible. And we could have managed both if we had acted maturely on all sides all round. Unfortunately, we are not able to. And the regime could see the fissure that there was, and they played along with that. So they would put people who would raise those concerns. And unfortunately, both sides, you'd find people who would react immaturely and end up in fights. And we ended up in 5 years of paralysis. So our method as Alliance for National Transformation is to pursue the method that we believe will work. And even if there's anybody who is pursuing any other method, whether we agree with it or don't agree with it, we discipline ourselves, we restrain ourselves from provoking them or undermining them. We just let it be, because whichever method is going to work will work. Two, they would deliberately target people, like mostly, and this has two ways one needs to look at it. One, They are so fearful of people who engage in civil disobedience because they know what it means. Mostly it works in cities. If you're involved in civil disobedience and you are able to mass maybe 10,000 people in Kampala or in different towns, they know that if they don't nip that in the bud, that it can really be a danger to their existence as a regime. They have seen what happens in cases like Egypt. They have seen cases like in currently in Khartoum. So anybody who pursues civil disobedience, they will do all manner of actions to nip whatever they are doing in the bud. So I understand that fully, why they ensure that people whom they think would go and mobilize people within urban centers, that they destabilize them all enough so they are not able to build numbers. So I recognize that. We pursue different paths. There are many times we have gone to rural areas and we go at the sub-county level, we operate, and even the press never gets to know about that until we are able to come back. Before we went into elections, we had gone to 3 different districts where we did pilot studies. We spent 5 days in Serere and did 11 sub-counties. We spent 4 days and a half in Namaingo. We did 9 sub-counties, meeting sub-county opinion leaders morning and afternoon, 1-1. We did that in Ugwere for 3 days because they have 6 sub-counties. We completed that exercise and the press wasn't so much aware. We didn't even try to publicize it so much because our main focus was, see, when we left, we have got significant presence in those areas, like in the results of the 2021 elections. In Ugwe, that's where we got 14 local government leaders, local council leaders. In Serere, that's where we got 9. In another area where we did not go as a party, but however, where our colleagues had done groundwork of that nature. In this particular case, Honorable Cassiano Wadri in Terego. That's also got significant results in terms of leadership. We got LC5, LC3 chairpersons. We got about 7 or 8 councillors. But when you are doing that kind of work, one, it tends to be, it's not attractive, to be honest with you, in terms of politics. Many people don't recognize what you are doing. It's painstaking work, and the regime also never bothers so much about that because it doesn't feel that it is a threat. However, for us, because we are doing things long term, want to establish a path at all levels, we'll keep doing that. And then we'll leave whoever wants to interpret the way they interpret things. That's not our business. Just keep doing what we have to do, because our mission is to ensure that we transform this country. We cannot transform it unless we take power. Cannot take power, I believe, unless we build a robust party and also keep linking up with like-minded Ugandans who want to change things. Those who believe in us will work with us. Those who don't believe in us, we have no problem with that. You can try other methods.
All right. Thank you for that. I just need to explain that I keep looking in different directions because I have this device in front of me. I have this device to the side that has the Twitter Spaces, and I have a device here that's monitoring another platform, the platform that should not be said out loud in Uganda. So yes, that's why I keep looking in different places. Well, General, I'd like to go to one of the topical things at the moment, the deployment of the UPDF, or the mission of the UPDF in DRC Congo. And this is something you've spoken about in the last couple of days, understandably so. A number of media outlets have sold you out for your opinion on it. And whereas your opinion is out there, I take cognizance of the fact that there are people who will join this conversation and have not had your opinion on this. So yes, I think the 30th of November, the UPDF, through its spokesperson, did confirm that the army had been deployed in DRC. This was after 2 bombs in Uganda, and partially the justification for that is, the bomb blasts were attributed to ADF, or sleeper cells in Uganda that are attached to ADF, and therefore pursuing them in DR Congo right after that had happened, was probably expected. But your view of the deployment, and considering that this time the deployment was with, after discussion with the leadership in Congo, the government in Congo. But again, this was without without parliamentary approval. That is in line with Article, I think, 210 of the Constitution, and then a few sections of the UPDF Act. Your view of the whole, UPDF deployment in DRC?
Thank you, Gabriel. Let me first give this background. One, we operate in a very, very tricky environment. At least those of us in the opposition recognize that General Museveni, who is conducting matters of state, is where he is not because he went through a free, fair, and transparent election. We know that he is there because he manipulated the electoral process, as he has done quite a number of times. However, some of us also recognize that de facto, he and the regime he heads is the one which is managing the day-to-day affairs of the country, including security. And therefore, we recognize that before we are in a position to take power and do things different, that we must deal with the situation as it is, not as it ought to be. So having said that, we know that the terror campaign which ADF has conducted, at least in the last 1 month or so, is conducted in a manner where the targets are indiscriminate, and therefore any of us is vulnerable. You don't have to be someone who supports the regime or against the regime. You don't have to be anything, specific. So we think that a group which operates like that needs to be, at least this is my own opinion, needs to be neutralized. And one, I recognize, for example, that I think President Tshisekedi is doing the right thing in approaching the different neighboring countries with which DRC borders, one of them being Uganda. We understand he's in touch with the Rwanda government. We understand he's in touch with the Burundi government, possibly even with Tanzania. And in specific terms with Uganda, we also think that it was the correct thing that this time around UPDF has gone into Congo with an agreement between DRC and the Uganda government, which is unlike in the past when the UPDF literally invaded Congo. So that was a plus. Two, also would like to believe that the commanders of UPDF need to recognize the history of UPDF in Congo. The image which was created in the incursions of the last two incursions was really unfortunate because the image of UPDF was dented, the image of the country was dented. It also led to an international court case in which we lost. And as we speak, we are meant to pay up to about 10 billion United States dollars. So with that background, my hope is that the commanders of UPDF need to see this as an opportunity to clean up the image of UPDF and also the image of the country. Because if UPDF officers and men keep focused on the mission and are able to neutralize ADF and also able to conduct counter-terror operations in a manner that does not cause human rights abuses, then they would achieve that. At least they would clean up the image of UPDF and also the image of the country, which is very, very important, because I don't think that men and officers and men in the army who serve and serve diligently, it cannot just be because of the money, because how much money do these officers and men get? I mean, the middle level officers get maybe 1 million, 1.5 million. And the lowest paid soldiers about 500,000 or 600,000. That's not the kind of money that would require a person to go lay their lives on the line. Mostly it is when I know, at least as someone who's been in the forces, that what gives you the highest state of pride is to operate to wear a uniform with pride when you know that you are doing what is right and that the population is behind you. And also, if you're engaged in military operations, like in this particular case, being outside of the country, to know that you are outside the country on a mission in which the country is behind you. And I think in that regard, coming now to the method that was used or the procedures or not being able to follow the process, which is General Museveni's habit, because it's not the first time. He has been sending UPDF out of the country without seeking the approval of Parliament. And he seems not to understand that it is really not an issue of contestation. It's a constitutional issue, one. However, to me, the most important thing, when you send officers and men outside on an external mission, in which they could actually lose their lives, and you deny them that feeling that they are outside of the country and they have got the backup of the country. And that is achieved when you have all arms of government as provided in the Constitution or working together, including, in this case, Parliament. Because they are not an external mission for a person, not for the president. They are outside on an external mission for the country. But General Museveni, out of short-sightedness and also maybe selfishness, he does not fulfill that. And therefore, he denies that to the officers and men. But that is his nature, because normally he wants to do things in a way of saying, you know, I can't do anything and nobody is going to do anything about it. Being a micromanager, his style, unfortunately, and also the mindset from which he operates, doesn't recognize the institutions. He more or less operates from a mindset of being the Alpha and the Omega. It's deceptive. It has happened for a while, yes, but it will have an end. And I believe, and I hope really, that the next group that takes power would be a group that would focus on building institutions, because the institutions, the strength of the institutions, the the smooth functioning of governance systems, at the end of the day, is the guarantor for stability in a country and for sustained economic growth and development. And also that gives people the confidence that they are operating in the country that is stable, that is growing, not because of the goodwill of any individual, whoever he or she is at the top, but because of the strength of institutions as are embedded within the Constitution. That's a matter which is under contestation. It's not only General Museveni's fault in this case, it's also the fault of the members of Parliament, because if you are backed up by the law, as it is by the Constitution, and you don't have the boldness to take your stand and ensure that the executive does not ride roughshod over you, then it's two-way. General Museveni is at fault, the Parliament itself is at fault. The biggest numbers are NRM, and therefore the population is also at fault. So the population that is complaining, most of them do not recognize that if they didn't do the things the way they did, you know, you mass numbers to support the regime. And this is the outcomes, because the majority of those who are on NRM side are not bold enough to take a stand and ensure that the Parliament is recognized as an institution, regardless of which party you belong to. Because being in a party is one thing, building institutions is another. And that's the way I look at this in this particular case.
Parliament on its part has actually asked or demanded that government comes and makes a statement about that deployment, and there are provisions to give retrospective approval of that deployment. But you know, the ministers have not been forthcoming, and the deputy speaker, who was chairing the House, did inform me that a statement will come next week. When you talk about Parliament not doing its part, can those actions be taken as Parliament is doing its part?
Saying things is one thing, doing them is another, because the Parliament has got all the powers to check the executive. But all that is dependent on the level of commitment, the level of courage and boldness that the members of Parliament would exercise those powers. I've never been in that Parliament. I remember, for example, the 6th Parliament was so active. I think that's when they actually carried out censorship of ministers. If the Parliament had kept on building its capabilities, General Museveni would not be running the country as if he's running his own home. But because he started working on those who belong to the ruling party, he whips them, and those who are strong are eliminated, and he's piled up with so many people whose main focus really is survival as individuals, being members of Parliament, and therefore they are not able to use the law. I mean, right, even as we speak now, if they stood firm, about 250 of them or 300 of them out of 500, that means there would have to be those who come from the ruling party. They can call the executive to order. They've got the law on their side. So it's not the law, it's not the weakness in the law, or even the weakness in the constitution. There are adequate provisions for checking the executive. But if they don't exercise their powers, they will just keep on being manipulated. And they just keep on complaining and lamenting as if they don't have the law on their side to check the executive. So it's the mindset. It is the boldness or lack of it that eventually determines how the executive operates. They are the ones who determine the budget. You know, right now, I suspect that at some point, depending on how long the UPDF remains in Congo, they will need a supplementary budget. So if they call you and you just simply pass it, you know, then you have faith, use the leverage that you have as the first time, because General 7 deployed in Central African Republic, deployed in South Sudan without fulfilling that role. And two, I also recognize that there are times when the army needs to move and take advantage of a surprise attack. I recognize that. But the leadership is about looking at situations, looking at if there are provisions for handling particular situations. If there are no provisions within the law, then you meet. In this particular case, the executive and parliament would meet and say, okay, how do we deploy the army without losing the element of surprise? And then they would put the necessary provisions within the law and then follow them. But see, in this particular case, even when it requires that you brief parliament within a particular number of days, they have not done that. It's a mindset problem. General 7 doesn't believe in that. Parliament just uses it as a rubber stamp, simply to create a facade that is, democratic governance dispensation. Only for that, and unfortunately, the members of parliament, the majority of them, seem not to recognize that it is their role to tame the executive or to check the executive. And that's where we are at. But the Ugandans also have a role to play in this particular case. Because by the time they send those members of parliament, they really need to know what kind of people they are sending. You know, need to look at their track records, need to understand whether they are people who simply care about their own survival as individuals. What is their mindset? What are their views about institutions building? You know. So we are a work in progress, basically. We'll just keep doing our role and hope everybody else also do their own part.
I'm glad that you touched on that issue of, the element of surprise and how it should be taken care of, because yes, it's a tactic in, warfare. And as we, transition to another topic, and we will only come back to this to take care of questions and comments that we'll be receiving from those joining us for the conversation today. In your view, given your military background, what would success of this mission look like?
First, my hope, I don't know the agreement which DRC and Uganda have struck. My hope that it is, I really hope that it is limited only to operations against ADF, because Eastern Congo is so full of all different kinds of groups. Some are political, others are simply territorial groups that are creating an environment in which they can loot minerals and things like that. So my hope is that UPDF is only there for ADF, and therefore the main focus would have to be how to completely eliminate the operational capabilities of ADF. And the moment they're able to do that, then their mission, I suppose, would be over, and then they just come back home. However, I also recognize that in my own view, as an individual, that looking at the way in which the current president of Congo is operating, His Excellency Tshisekedi, he seems to be someone who wants to build state capabilities to have total control over Eastern Congo. And I think that now that he's approaching the different countries in East Africa, that they need to create a framework within which East Africa can coordinate with DRC Congo and help in the stabilization of Congo to ensure that the Congo state has a robust presence in every part of Eastern Congo in terms of administrative presence, in terms of or organs of state, the judiciary, to have local councils, to have stability for business to prosper, to have the security services present, the army and the police. Because once Eastern Congo is stable, and hopefully the whole of Congo, it is a big factor in the economic growth of East Africa overall. So my hope is that there would be a regional approach in regard to that overall question of an unstable Eastern Congo. But for UPDF, I would like to, I think, and I firmly believe that they should only target ADF. And if Uganda was to be requested within the East African framework for the stabilization of Eastern Congo, then it could participate in that regard, but as part of the larger group of East African actors.
All right, thank you, General. If we could just segue to something not too far from that. One of the army chiefs of Uganda, reports came out a few days ago that the U.S. Treasury Department, had put first we say travel sanctions, and then later we hear there also financial, sanctions. Your view on that, and part of the reasons for those sanctions in the communication that announced those sanctions is actions that took place, one, under his watch, but also they say that he conducted them himself. Are these sanctions, in your view, commensurate to the alleged actions, and what does this mean for the image of Uganda and of the army?
Well, I don't know the details. I don't know the nature of the investigations which the United States of American government has conducted. However, it is the first time for them to use that tool that is at their disposal. They do it quite a number of times all over the world. And mostly it is a signal to the sitting regime, mostly. And I would like to believe that maybe this is also just a signal, because it's just targeting one person, because one person couldn't have acted just as an individual, Maybe it is a signal to the whole establishment that, look, wake up. If it is that, then I think it would be right. It would be in the sense that it tallies with what we believe ourselves. I mean, when you look at the manner in which General Museveni has been abusing the forces, the army, the police, the intelligence services, in the manipulation of the electoral process. When you see what happened in the last period, the manner in which they used the armed forces and the police forces and intelligence services literally to terrorize groups like Muntu was thoroughly terrorized. We are trying to build an environment, a political environment in this country where there can be competition for power in a civilized manner. And then you have a regime which just wants to hang on to power at any cost. And the outcomes of what they do are definitely, inevitably, they have to be. I think the West is caught up between a rock and a hard place, because in a sense, I think to some extent, because of the counter-terror stance which General Museveni has taken in the region, I think the USA and some of the European countries feel as if they are beholden to him. He plays that card very well. So I think it's also up to them to wake up, to know that General Museveni is just an individual, he's a human being, he's there today, tomorrow he won't be. And therefore, they should be investing in Uganda to ensure that Uganda has got stable institutions, that he has got many people who are able to care for the interests of Uganda and to work for its stability, not just to look at just one individual. But that's a different problem. It is them who will have to determine that. I don't think that their stance of investing in just an individual is correct. But they are, at the end of the day, I don't blame them myself, because at the end of the day, any country to put its own house in order must depend on its own internal capabilities, and therefore must organize at a domestic level. Anything which happens from outsiders will just be supplementary. I never look to foreigners to think that they have got the capability to change any domestic political situation or economic situation in a country. So at the end of the day, we are the ones who must keep on building our capabilities until we put our own house in order.
All right, we are not certain on the fine details of these sanctions, but at least the UPDF, through its spokesperson, has come out and said, you know, the general wasn't given a fair hearing, and also this may jeopardize the bilateral relationships between Uganda and the US. And then on the other hand, the general says, this doesn't mean anything much to me. I had no intentions of going to the US. Do these kinds of sanctions, in your view, actually have an implication? Or, you know, it's just some kind of smoke screen or some scare tactic that doesn't have any real, you know, any real repercussions, any real effects?
What the spokesperson has talked about, I didn't hear her. But one thing that anybody within Uganda or anybody outside of Uganda needs to know that for US to put sanctions on anybody, they never give them hearing. I've never heard of any country where they have put sanctions on anybody and that they invited them and listened to them. United States it has got its own policies. It's the one which determines how to use its tools to influence opinion in the rest of the world. That one I leave to at that. And two, really, to me, the officers, including General Kandiho and all other officers of UPDF and police and intelligence services, what they should fear most are not the sanctions of the outside world. What they should fear most are the internal sanctions of the Ugandan people themselves. They should not be blind to the fact that whatever a man sows, so shall he reap. If they don't start taking opportunity, recognizing that inevitably there will be change at some point, and start cleaning up their image, one as institutions, two as individuals, they would be blind, because change happens. Change is inevitable. Anybody who is reasonable should look, even in the last 50 years, the kind of changes which have happened in the different countries. There's no group which can hang on to power until the end of time. So what they would be doing now is how do they work in a manner, one, to recover the image that they have lost, even internally at the domestic level, and start working for a new dispensation in which everybody will feel secure, whether you're in uniform, whether you're out of uniform. I think that's what they need to work for most, because, you know, if they keep on operating in arrogant ways, like I see many of them do, there's going to be a time when they won't be in uniform. There's going to be a time when they won't have weapons around them to protect them. That's at a point when you fear sanctions, because you know you've got nowhere to hide. So anybody who's reasonable should be looking at that kind of situation at a point in future, whatever that time is, when nobody is going to be there to protect you. So the only protection you have is that you've done things right. Or even if you did certain things wrong at some point, that the society sees you trying to take steps to rectify whatever mistakes you made. People are always forgiving. If you keep churning on in arrogant ways, like I see many do, life can be very complicated. One day you can be there, you know, having soldiers all around you. Another day you can feel so vulnerable because you don't even have anybody with a pistol around you to protect you.
General, because of time, we need to move to the next topic. And on my end, it looks like the general's video has frozen. Okay, all right, excellent. I can now see some movement. Well, let's talk a bit about corruption, because this week we did commemorate, we joined the rest of the world in commemorating International Anti-Corruption Day, when the NRA at that time came to power. 10-point program. Point number 7 was on eliminating corruption and abuse of power. It's 36 or so years on. We had a commemoration, and your view on how we've done on the fight against corruption.
I think Genome 7 is a response to the current IGG. I think it was a day ago, summarizes that. I watched a clip. I didn't watch the whole speech. I just watched a small clip, and it almost literally knocked the air out of my lungs. I was astounded. President of a country can stand on a platform and say what he said. But at the end of it all, I don't really wholly blame him. Because the biggest problem is that it is not what he says, because at least he says the truth. Basically, what he said, I believe, comes from deep in his own, thinking. What worries me is the response from us, the Ugandans. Because when you have a leader of the country, not once, not twice, the leader is saying the same thing. For those who keep hanging around him and look to him as if he can be a solution to the problems of this country, is what bothers me. Amongst whom there are people who are educated. I just simply can't understand how someone can be so truthful a number of times, like he says, he says that that they should not scare people who are corrupt because they may invest outside of the country. So what is he saying? Basically, he's saying that whoever has an opportunity to steal, you steal, as long as you can invest here. Basically, that's what he's saying. So what will Betty Kamya do in the IGG's office with what she was saying that she's going to carry out a lifestyle audit? That's the end of that initiative, if she wanted to carry it out at all. Basically, that's the end. There's no way she can proceed beyond that. And that's where we are going to be until a new group goes into power. And my hope that the new group would also be different from the groups we have seen so far. This is also another thing. It doesn't mean that the moment Genome 7 is out of power, that necessarily whichever group goes in will do things different from how he has done them. Because we have seen all these groups that come in, all of them get there, they cannot withstand the temptations of power, they become corrupted by power, they just start doing the wrong things. And again, this is an opportunity for Ugandans who believe in the values to do all things which are necessary to be done to prepare for how to manage the post-70 period. But before the Genome 7 leaves power, people who have any hope that there can be a meaningful fight against corruption, they're just daydreaming. It just simply won't happen. Because it's the mainstay of the regime. Basically, it's the mainstay of the regime.
Does the fact that laws to fight corruption have been passed, institutions have been set up like the Inspectorate of Government, Office of the Auditor General, even a unit within the State House, and the president coming out and say zero tolerance to corruption, we're going to make sure that we get the corrupt. Does that mean anything to the fight against corruption? Because yes, the government argues that on their part they've tried to put measures in place, and it's the public that's not joining the fight and exposing the corrupt.
All those whatever the regime apologists have been saying, maybe we should salute Genome 7 in his speech. Because he has tossed all that out of the window. They've been, talking about this, giving all kinds of excuses. And in one statement, he comes and says, guys, it doesn't matter. If you are corrupt and you can invest whatever proceeds of corruption here, that's okay. Because basically that's what he said. So I'm hoping that we're not going to hear regime apologists talking about weakness in the laws, talking about weak judiciary, talking about all kinds of things. That's the statement everybody should take to be the truth. That's the operational mindset of whatever is happening within government. Forget about those, like there's an anti-corruption department in the presidency, I think headed by Colonel Karim. It's a facade to make people think that now the government is cracking down the corrupt. They're just cracking down on the small fellows down there. There's no you can eliminate corruption without starting from the top. And Jerome Seven has made a very clear statement. I really thank him for that. This is going to save us from people who've been apologizing all the time. Now we know where the regime stands. So the question is, how do we respond as Ugandans? That's the question. The ball is not in, is no longer in Jerome Seven's court. The ball is in the court of the middle class, basically because they are the influencers. Don't think that the peasants are going to react in any way. The peasants can never, set themselves free ever. It's always the leadership, and the leadership is always within the middle class. The people who are educated. How do they react? That's the question. Do they remain in a state of willful blindness? To keep hoping that yes, something is happening around the fight against corruption, from the rhetoric, from what we hear in the regime. Yesterday, Jerome Seven summarized all that and put it to rest. So those of us who are influencers need to wake up, including those who, for some strange reason, still had some hope in Jerome Seven and the regime. They really should move and start reorganizing and working anew for the future.
General Mugisha Muntu, as ridiculous as that statement may sound, there are actually, economic theories and points of view that talk about positive corruption and talk about proceeds from corruption being invested into the economy and getting things moving. And we actually have had people try to push those lines here in Uganda. And previously, the people have been criticized, but this time it has been said by the president, and I don't know, and is it your view that that's something that can be considered, seeing that the other way hasn't yielded the kind of fruit that we expected it, and that is the outright fight, find the corrupt, imprison them, and corruption will end, as the traditional way of fighting corruption?
There are different viewpoints, I understand, in regard to the fight against corruption. There are those whom hear talk about the positive nature of corruption. I don't subscribe that view myself. I believe corruption is corruption. Because even in countries where they say that corruption is a contributory factor to growth, what nature of growth? Because you can have the corrupt building estates and building hotels and building all kinds of things. And if you look at countries where corruption buds and sprouts in that way, if you look at them critically, you'll find about 10% of the population high up there, and then you can find like 80% of the population is living in dire poverty. So is that what we want in this country? Because corruption, once it grows, and mostly if it grows along acceptance, then it has got significant negative ramifications in the livelihoods of the majority of the people. Most times it also leads to lawlessness. It leads to a point where if you don't have money, you basically cannot almost have any freedom. Someone can just come and trample over you, either take your house or take your land or whatever, and you'll find that you have no recourse to justice. Normally, that's the nature of the political economic conditions you find in those countries. I mean, we see those countries like in Latin America, yes. My own view is that there should be zero tolerance to corruption. We have seen clear examples where countries which pursue that line of zero tolerance to corruption, that it causes those countries to prosper and that everybody prospers in those kinds of situations. One of the most significant, I think, examples that is used worldwide is Singapore, a small island nation under Lee Kuan Yew. You can see where it is, you know, all the time examples are given, who are at the same level in terms of income per capita in the 60s. Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, around 300 United States dollars. Look at where we are now. We're around 1,000. Singapore being the highest amongst all those at around 45,000 United States dollars per capita. Also, when you see spread in terms of welfare, you don't find the poor of the poor in Singapore. Singapore has got the largest, I think, percentage in terms of shareholding. Citizens who have got shares in different economic entities. It is even higher than the number of first world economies, because it's about 80%, higher than Europe, some countries in Europe, higher than even the United States of America. But for a country to achieve that, you must have discipline in leadership. There must be a culture of discipline. And one of the things that needs to be done, I think, is zero tolerance to corruption. But at the end of the day,
you can conclude the thought at the end of the day.
I think at the end of the day, it's really dependent on us as the Ugandan people, more so the educated, because we are the influencers. We are the ones who influence the direction of things. What do we want to see? What kind of society do we want to build? Whichever we choose of the two approaches, and whichever we back is what will succeed. So we have to make choices, not just wait and be swung from one direction to another by whoever wants to take us wherever they want to take us.
Right. After this response, we'll give an opportunity to those who would like to ask you any question. And if you're going to tweet or use social media to send in your question, please remember to use the hashtag #MugishaMuntu so that it's easy for the team to locate your question or your comment and send it my way. I'll also be trying to look out for those. And then those who would like to speak on Twitter Spaces, just go ahead and request. I can see 2 requests already, but as people prepare their questions, I'll just ask you one more thing. What the Honorable Betty Kamya and her team are trying to do here, or at least what they say they are trying to do, is to make the fight against corruption the people's fight. And they have, the new plan of, lifestyle audit, and that's what the president was launching. And it was in that context that he made that comment. But how do we make corruption the people's fight?
The government has to take the lead. Normally, when there's a change of regime, there's always a window, almost like 1 year. Whichever direction the regime takes is most likely where the population, heads. They create the, they give the signal. For the population to participate in anti-corruption effort, they must get a cue from the top. If the top leaders themselves are not corrupt, and if they give necessary funding to the anti-corruption institutions, in this case, the Criminal Investigation Department of Police, invest in IGG, invest in the Directorate of Prosecutions, and also give them clear signs that nobody is beyond the law. That's why you start. I mean, if like General Museveni in this last appearance he made when 2 days ago, If you had given the IGG signals and said, you know what, we are going to boost the budget of IGG, we are giving you leeway to recruit and staff IGG department to be robust, and you can do anything within the law, arrest anybody. Nobody is above the law. If you have given that statement, then we would have known that there's a new beginning. Before that, everything is just stories, whatever they talk about.
Okay, General. All right, General, let's open up for questions and comments. I have somebody here called Katimbo. I don't know why I'm not able to see your request anymore. Okay, it said requested. All right, let's see if that's there. All right, Katimbo Grace Edgar. I have approved your request. You can go ahead and speak. I don't seem to hear you. All right, let's take Damba Ivan. Damba Ivan, go right ahead.
This regime more. So it's now because thank you very much. I feel that corruption is almost in the culture of our people. How are we gonna fight that? It's a very, very big problem. Not from the grassroots, from the wananchi up to the top people. How is he prepared to fight this? Because it's a very, very big place on our country.
All right, so you're asking how General Mugisha Muntu is prepared to fight corruption because it is at all levels of our society. All right, thank you, Katimbo Grace Edgar. Ivan, you can now, Damba, Ivan, I believe, you can go ahead and speak. Just try and be louder so that people on all the platforms can hear us.
Thank you very much, Iguma. I want to ask the General. He was one of those people who brought Genome 7 into power, and he was the CDF before at a tender age of 29. So what I want to ask the General is how will he help us in fighting corruption? And the other thing is as he came to run for the presidency, and we have some issues with him during his time as the CDF. How will he account for all the things which were done by him and the Genome 7?
For clarity,
purchasing power, whereby they had to purchase a lot of things from abroad, but which were fake during his regime as the CDF.
Okay.
How will he account for when he is standing for presidency? Thank you very much.
All right, Damba, thank you for your question. Let me accept one more request. The requests are now growing. Let's see. Okay, I was looking out for a female. I don't see any. So let me just accept the request from Patrick. Kaitare Patrick. Go right ahead. Patrick, we cannot hear you. You need to unmute yourself. Patrick, you're muted. If you could unmute yourself. Yes, Patrick, go ahead. All right, you know what? Let me allow Andrew to speak. Andrew, you can go ahead.
ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening, Andrew. At least for the people in Uganda, good evening.
Many thanks to the general. I want to admit that I'm a fan follower and admirer of that school. It very unmatched in the country. But one thing, the question of corruption, I think when author in his book, The Republic, he better said that man was unselfish. And it was not regretful comment. He have everything for himself. And there are two elements I want to pick up from that particular thing. One is that corruption is as old as mankind, as human history. You know, Plato between 1437 and 1347. Now you can see that even then corruption had become societal problem.
All right, Andrew, are you saying we cannot fight corruption?
And his group is a wrong notion.
Okay.
Number two, that thing is the law. What Plato says that if there is no law to regulate man's conduct, then he will have everything for himself. Now, from what we see, the Museveni and his regime, haven't they put in place a good legal framework to regulate corruption? Don't we have institutions like IGG? Now, currently, there is corruption operation from other state house. Don't we have the Penal Code Act and so many other laws in place to regulate? I see the will from Mr. Museveni and his regime, and this is all they can do.
Okay. Andrew, thank you for your comments. General, let me just read some that have come through social media. And if you could just take note of them, and then you'll respond to this first, a batch of questions. So somebody asks, how can the youth practically participate in the Alliance for National Transformation? And as youth, how can they sell the party? As a youth, how can you sell the party to the person asking this question? Then somebody says, as a woman, tell me why I should have hope in the politics of Uganda and what makes the Alliance for National Transformation different from other political parties. What policies are in place to ensure equity and equality? Do you think Ugandans believe a woman can lead the country? I'll just read one more. What is your comment on General Museveni's idea, excuse me, of a merger of the East African Federation? All right, General, if you could respond to those questions as more come in. General, after you've responded, we'll give another opportunity for those who are requesting to speak on the Twitter Spaces.
A number of issues, I think, questions which are raised on corruption. How do you fight corruption? I think he was asking about we as ANT. You know, at the end of it all, I think any party which effectively fights corruption will only succeed to the extent that it has got a significant number of leaders who believe in zero tolerance to corruption. That's why we spend a lot of time, disseminating our stand as Alliance for National Transformation, being a value-driven organization, because we know there are a number of Ugandans who have the same thinking, and therefore would like to attract as many as is possible to build a party which has a number of leaders at different levels who, amongst other things, would know that the successful fight against corruption helps the country to grow the economy and also helps in many ways, in regard to how there will be a distribution of wealth. So at the end of it all, our focus is have as many Ugandans who believe in zero tolerance corruption come and become part of the fight within ANT. Because whichever party takes power, it will only be effective in doing whatever it does to the extent that it has got leaders who are committed to what they say they want to do. That's why we are at our Alliance for National Transformation. We keep on trying to recruit as many Ugandans who are like-minded to be able to fulfill the pledges that we would make to the country. And therefore, the fight against corruption really cannot be dependent on one single individual. It must be dependent on the teams of leaders at the different levels, the national, the district, the constituency levels, the sub-county levels. How do you explain your term in office when you are, I don't know whether the colleague who asked that question is able to access, at least the period when I was in command. My stance was zero tolerance to corruption. And I did all that was within my means and power to do that. I won't go into details. You can check out that. It is very easy to check out that. I left the army without engaging in any form of corruption. Not in government, not in the army. You can also check out that. And corruption is as old as history. Yes, corruption is as old as history. But what is also as old as history is the different stances that are taken by different actors. There are people who have always been corrupt, trying to advance corruption. There are those who have been fighting against corruption in society. So even the fight is as old as history. So right now, where we are at now, the issue is not how old corruption is. The issue is which side are you on? If you're one who thinks that corruption is okay because it has existed since time immemorial, then you have a side to take. But if you are someone who believes that much as all sin is as old as history, murder is as old as history. Actually, murder precedes the corruption because Cain killed Abel. Therefore, we could say, don't worry, let people kill each other. No, and the question is, yes, murder is as old as history, but there must be laws to ensure that whoever murders is investigated, is arrested, is tried, found guilty, sentenced, and sub-sentenced. That's basically what we're trying to say, even in regard to corruption. It says there are laws in place. Yes, laws don't implement themselves. It's the nature of people. For example, there are adequate laws that if there were people who are willing to stamp out corruption, they would stamp it out. But right now, where we are, the general dispensation that we are in, the regime believes in corruption and they promote it. And therefore, those who are on the side of fighting it cannot do anything much. Yes, there are moral guys at the district level, in the ministries, but not the top guys, the honchos. You know, that's basically the truth of the matter as I see it. How can the youth participate in NT? Yes, those who are in NT, build capabilities wherever you are. Attract more and more leaders at different levels, youth being the majority, 75% under 35, to ensure that the dominant tendency in Alliance for National Transformation is for people who believe in value-driven politics and establish that, work day and night, and establish it as a new culture. And that's the only way we can effectively change the nature of politics in this country and build a new culture. And by the way, it's not only in the NT. Even those who are in other parties fight so that the dominant force in any party is those who believe in good governance principles, those who believe in fairness, in transparency, in justice, in equality before the law, in a sustainable economic development that benefits all, in law and order. So that whichever party would take power, once you have the dominant group which believes in those values, then you know that you are secure. You can go do your things. You don't even have to be in politics. And nothing will happen to you. That you are in a country that is run effectively. Short of that, we'll continue having a repetition of what we have seen since independence. A woman, why should a woman hope in Ugandan politics? Women are 52% of the population. They're the ones who should work wherever they are, in whichever party they are. to ensure that they change the nature of politics. Nobody is going to change that. It's a role of every Ugandan. The only division I see actually in Uganda, as is in other countries, to me, the most critical difference is not men and women, is not age, is not whatever. It is where does one stand? Does one believe that there should be justice for all? Should there be fairness in governance, transparency in the management of national resources? And once you build a critical number in different areas where you are, then you know that everybody should have hope, because you know that whoever takes power, in this particular case, like in the opposition, that's what would drive us Alliance for National Transformation. But I would like to believe that even those who are in other parties, FDC, JMA, NUP, and DP, that they also keep building the same capabilities. Because at the end of the day, any direction the country takes is going to be dependent on who are the dominant force in whichever party takes power. If the dominant force in any party which takes power, for example, don't care about fighting against corruption, if they want to take advantage of the weak situation to also benefit from it, that's the direction the country will take. If there are people who don't believe in justice, you won't have justice. If there are people who don't care about transparency in the management of national resources, you won't have that. If they are not democratic in their convictions, there's no, you have the growing of democracy as a culture. So basically what I'm trying to say is that participate in whichever party you are convinced about. Become part of building the critical number that will change the nature of politics in the way it is applied, in the way it is conducted in the party, because the party can only do in government, give what it has. There's nobody who's going to give you what they don't have. So if you want to see transparency, you want to see good governance, you want to see transparency, you want to see equality for the, you want to see fairness, and you believe in those and you are convinced about them, choose to be in whichever party to add on to the numbers that may be there. In Alliance for National Transformation, that's the direction we are taking. We keep on trying to convince Ugandans who believe in that you come, let's work together to build a new culture in this country. East African Federation, yes. East African Federation, yes. General Museveni, in regard to that, is correct. The only problem is that he operates in ways which undermine what he desires to see. So there's no way you can come and ride roughshod in your own country. And all these countries are building blocks for a larger federal unit, you know? So he needs to really try to be consistent. Do what you want to see happen at the East African Federation level. For example, would he want to, if we were to federate, would he want to see the mess which is in Uganda at the federal level? You know, he should ask himself that. Because General Museveni talks about East African Federation as a tool for building strength, as a tool of protecting ourselves from those on the outside in the global world who would want to exploit us. But you know, strength is not because of numbers, people coming together. No, strength is what you do to empower people, empower your own citizenry. Could do things in such a way that people are unified around common objectives, common interests, common purposes. But if you're exploiting people, why on earth do you think, how on earth do you think you can build strength, you know, around people who are disempowered? And if there's disempowerment at the national level, how on earth do you expect that you're going to integrate? You know, General Museveni is sucked into a contradiction of his own making, but history will sort him out as it would sort out all of us. The moment you take a wrong direction, history sorts you out. We wouldn't be the first. We have seen it happen in the course of history until now.
All right, General, I have to come in because of time, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to allow as many questions as I thought we could. You and I are gentlemen, and the ones who have spoken have been gentlemen. I'll just allow for one lady to speak. I see that there is someone here called, and please forgive me if I say your name wrongly, Arao Ameni. Let me allow you to speak, and then General will give us his last word for today. Respond to your question and give his last word for today. Yes. Oh, did she just, oh no, there she is. Please unmute your microphone and go ahead and speak.
Thank you. Thank you to the host, the listeners, and General Muntu. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Aral. I have one question, actually two questions. Transparency International ranked Uganda 142 out of 179 in its 2020 Corruption Perception Index. General Muntu, what do you think is the first thing that needs to be prioritized for Ugandans to have trust in our leaders? Secondly, how do you think opposition parties can contribute to fight corruption, including corruption inside their own parties? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that question. I did host a program the day before, the International Anti-Corruption Day. And one of the panelists said, a businessman said, you would think that the districts that are headed by the opposition would be less corrupt, but they have found that the districts headed by the opposition seem to be, trying to catch up by even being more corrupt than other districts. They seem to want to amass as much as possible when they have the chance to. But yes, General, please go ahead and respond to Aral's question. She made me remember that conversation on another platform. General, your video just went off. If you could put your video.
I'm trying. Thank you, Raul. I hope I got the name correct. 142. Yeah, that's quite a bad position to be at. I think the only way we can change the perceptions about leadership so as to gain trust is the manner in which we conduct ourselves as leaders, whether those in government, whether we are in the opposition. And therefore, my hope is that the opposition parties, we need to do everything possible to attract more and more Ugandans who would do things in a way that would regain the trust of people in leadership. Because for the last 60 years, the tendency has been that the majority of people who are in politics tend to act in ways that undermine trust. We become corrupt, we tell lies, we are divisive, we manipulate society. However, that is not to say that there are anti-Ugandans who have integrity. And I hope that not only us in the opposition, but that other educated Ugandans need to recognize that problem where we are at. You don't want to tell me that there are no honest Ugandans. There are many men and women who are honest. But my own observation is that the majority of them tend not to want to join politics. That's what the dilemma is, because nature hates vacuums. So when there's a vacuum, there are people who fill it. And now the tendency where we are at now is a significant portion of the people who go into politics. I think maybe 6 or 7 out of 10 go there simply for individual survival. And therefore, when they get there, they do all things necessary to advance themselves as individuals. They're not thinking about the country first and foremost. So how do you shift the balance of forces to the favor of those who want to do what is right? My own estimation is that Ugandans who are honest, Ugandans who have integrity, men and women, look for organizations in which you would go until the balance of forces in favor of those who want to do right. I don't see how else it can be done, to be honest with you. We're not going to manufacture people. Simply can't. So every single woman or man, Ugandan, who believes in transparency in the management of national resources, who is honest, who has integrity, I would urge them to either directly participate in politics or participate in the background, but by encouraging people who are like-minded, so that you build a critical number in one or two parties, you may not be able to do it overall across the board in a short period of time, but become a critical factor in one or two parties so that the moment such a party takes power, in this particular case, let me be selfish and campaign for NT because we already have the thinking, just join the platform of NT. Or if you are in a party where already you believe like that, build your numbers there. And therefore, in the process of doing what is right on a consistent basis, you rebuild the trust with the Ugandan people. Then opposition, how do we fight corruption? Yes, by not being corrupt in whatever we do. One, within our own parties. Two, we've been, for example, ANT, in the last 2 months, we didn't get many leaders, but those whom we got, about 50 of them, some of them are holding positions at administrative levels. And the first thing we were trying to make them understand is that few as they are, that they need to be examples to rebuild hope in the Ugandan people. So that even when they are operating at whatever unit, at the sub-county, at the district, that they become models to show that this is a microcosm of what we would want to see happen on a larger scale. And in regard to that, we would need backup from Ugandans who want to see that experiment happen, succeed. We need resources. We need participation in all ways, influencing things so that we build a new culture. But if we stand on the sidelines and hope that things are going to change in the positive direction, that never happens. That can never happen. Nothing good can ever happen by accident. Anything good can only happen out of conscious, deliberate, focused, consistent actions from people who want to do exactly that. And we are trying to build the numbers to be able to do that. And I therefore would like to hope that the Ugandans who believe in value-driven politics, that you join ANT and we keep fighting until we become victorious. And I believe by God's grace, we will triumph at some point.
That's an excellent point to leave it on, General Muntu. And would like to thank you very much for having this conversation with us. It's been quite an honor hosting you. And I've been informed by the ANT technical team that these conversations take place every month. So if you didn't have the opportunity to ask your question, you can actually continue to engage on social media, but look forward to the next, the next engagement, Ask Mugisha Muntu, which will be happening in January of 2022. So just continue following his social media pages, and you'll find out who will be hosting him next. But for me and the good general and the whole team that has made this possible, I'd like to thank you for giving your time. And I'd like to say, God bless you and God bless Uganda. Bye, General, and bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.